Another day, another dollar. Well, pounds, actually, and 1 billion of them. Following yesterday's indecisive cabinet on the Omicron threat and what to do about it, as you will know, they settled for, well, keeping a close eye on it. The Chancellor, who opposed any tougher measures, actually then came up with a slightly different plan. He didn't want to curb our socialising or our mingling, but he did want to offer £1 billion in support to the increasingly worried hospitality sector. It seemed to me as if he'd been on the other side of the argument with Michael Gove and Sajid Javid and had voted for strict new restrictions and won and come up with the money. But he wasn't, and he didn't, and nor did they win. The truth is that Rishi Sunak is responding to folk who are doing the sensible thing voluntarily. They're cutting back on their festive celebrations, cancelling parties, dinners, and not going out for drinks with the gang. All very wise and probably the best way of curbing COVID. But for restaurateurs and publicans, it's another hammer blow. But this time there's a big difference. Under lockdown, we had no choice, and nor did they. This time, and right now, we're just being told to be sensible. And we are. These are voluntary recommendations, not tough new government edicts. In that sense, the problems that the hospitality sector are facing are more of our making than the government's. Now, the stooges among you, therefore, might say ministers are being overgenerous. You may have a point. As for the reaction, well, some on the hospitality sector have welcomed £1 billion of our money, taxpayers' money, calling it unprecedented. Others, not surprisingly, have said it simply isn't enough. A £6,000 claim, they've probably got a point. But a line has to be drawn somewhere, you'd have thought. Well, there are many yet more to come. Depending on what happens on the COVID front, the Chancellor said he would always respond proportionately and appropriately to the situation that we face. Mr. Sunak said he was keeping the situation under review and monitoring the data day by day, hour by hour. And he said the government ruled out nothing. Labour's shadow Treasury Minister Pat McFadden described Mr. Sunak's announcement as a holding package from a government court in a holding position. And Pat McFadden may have a point. Now, the taxpayer's already been tapped up for £370 billion since the pandemic took a grip, with job support schemes, furlough particularly, getting about a third of that. And of that total, around £300 billion was borrowed, an eye-watering sum that our heirs and successors will have to pay back, unless inflation wipes it out, in which case, economically, inflation will probably wipe out most of them as well. So, another billion for the hard-pressed hospitality sector is but a drop in the ocean. But even that gives me three problems. While many hospitality and leisure firms have been hit by a collapse in bookings and reduced footfall due to people's fears over the spread of the Omicron variant, they haven't been closed by the government. We have simply stayed safe. If the government feels the need, nevertheless, to step in, will the loans and grants be properly policed? There is strong evidence of people ripping off government support schemes, especially at a time of crisis. It's our money, and it should be properly looked after. Second, is that it? No one knows. And so government support and borrowing are a bottomless pit. Borrowing is money that's happily lent by the banks and other international financial institutions at slowly increasing prices as interest rates rise. We, the taxpayer, pay that interest too. And thirdly, we have a government accused of either having too many plans for COVID, A, B, and the whispered C, or as Labour would have it, not enough plans. What I haven't heard is a word about the plan to restore the public finances and get the economy back on its feet when this ghastliness abates or shrinks to a manageable and acceptable level that can be coped with by sensible people. Is it not a time for a Mr. Micawber to leave the stage with his hopes that something will turn up and put someone there who really knows what they can do? We need to interrogate what we're doing now, like that extra cash for pubs and restaurants. And we need to have a clear vision for how we're going to get going again and begin to curb borrowing, cut taxes and start to pay down that colossal debt.